For more debates, updates, and bonus content, sign up at thebigconversation.show.
The simulation hypothesis, which is that we are living in a computer simulation. Not in a metaphorical sense that the kind of laws of physics were usefully described like in terms of algorithms, but in the literal sense that we are inside some computer built by some advanced civilization.
Ros, what are your thoughts? Because this is the kind of fairly mind-blowing hypothesis, isn't it? What's your thoughts on it?
Well, I used to build simulations, so I've thought a lot about them. And I'm curious, behind the simulation, there's usually a purpose for the simulation. There's usually some mind, at least in my experience, building the simulation. If it's one I built, it doesn't work perfectly, or the computers don't work perfectly. So after, so many days of simulating or weeks of simulating, some of the computers I'm running it on crash and I have to restart it. And so within the simulation, there's a different time concept than outside of the simulation, right? Depending when you restart and what you reset. There's a lot of attributes of it. And I'm curious, maybe to hear your thoughts on the mind behind a simulation that we could be in.
So I think
what kind of mind do you think that
so it would be some kind of super intelligence, presumably, because creating simulations with conscious beings and where the virtual environment is indistinguishable from reality is very hard. Like, clearly, it's not something we can currently do. Although computer games are getting better each year in terms of their graphics, but we're still a long way away from that. So I'm imagining that by the time that becomes possible, other things will also have become possible, such as cognitive enhancement of biological intelligence and presumably machine superintelligence. Even if some simulations were done before you had true machine superintelligence, which I doubt, nevertheless, after you have superintelligence, you will be able to build vastly more of these simulations, because with superintelligence, you could just move much more quickly to the limits, the technological limits that physics permit. You could colonize the universe, turn planets into supercomputers, and so forth. So I think almost all simulations would be built by superintelligences. So that's one thing we can infer. Regarding their motivations, we could imagine a range of different possible motivations for creating simulations. And I think we are somewhat ignorant as to the relative preponderance of these different possible motivations. I mean, you could ask just why do humans create simulations and imaginary worlds? And we do it for all kinds of reasons. There's like recreational attempts, right, with video games or movies and theater and so forth. There maybe like you could imagine historical research, like to kind of explore counterfactuals for history. You could imagine historical tourism if you want to experience the past, but time travel just doesn't work, right, because of physics. Then the second best thing might be to create a kind of recreation of some historical epoch, and then you could kind of inhabit that for some period of time. So like we humans do similar things, like historical reenactments is our best effort. If we could make them more realistic, some people probably would. And yeah, there's a bunch of other things as well that you could imagine, like maybe you could use them for to find out more about the origin or the forces shaping different kinds of AI civilizations, to study how they might have arisen.
It's hard talking online, but one of my colleagues once said he thought maybe that this world and this life was kind of like a simulation, but it was real, but it was one of many, a series of them, and a series of realities. And we were in this one to have the freedom to make the choice as to whether or not we wanted to go on to the next one. And he was a Christian, believing the next one was the great beyond, that if you choose to be known by God, you get to go to. And that was, his saying that God doesn't want to force that choice on us. This is the world where we get to choose freely, whether we accept this free gift of Jesus, to accept this loving gift to go to the next one. Because we come into this world without that choice, right? We're here. We weren't given that opportunity to say, I want to be here. But we get the opportunity to say if we want to go to the next one. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's another class of possible reasons for why somebody might create these things. And and you could imagine kind of people wanting a second run, or you could imagine, all kinds of reasons. Like maybe if somebody died early, you could imagine creating a simulation where they are allowed to continue out their normal life, and then maybe after that migrate into this larger reality. Like it's easy to create a lot of different imaginary possibilities. What's harder to do is to find some way to kind of constrain them and form a very firm expectation for. Because ultimately it's a question of numbers here. Like what would most simulations be like? Like if the universe is sufficiently big with a lot of civilizations, probably all of these and many other reasons have actuated some creation of simulation somewhere, but we would be most likely to be in the most common type of simulation. So if we are trying to form some kind of prediction about our own position.
It raises the whole question, though.
Go ahead.
It does raise the question for me, though, Nick, as Rosalind sort of alluded to, of the purpose of doing this, because it almost feels like such a super intelligence that could simulate an entire universe and our consciousness within it is almost godlike as far as we're concerned, you know. And when I hear people like Elon Musk and others sort of taking this idea quite seriously, that we are simply living in a sort of supercomputer simulation, I kind of almost wonder, isn't sort of the traditional God hypothesis that there's a transcendent divine mind behind the universe a kind of more parsimonious potentially explanation than this idea of a super intelligent alien race or whatever that has created us, which would itself in a sense need an explanation and just knock the question one place back. What's your view on all of that, Nick?
They're not mutually exclusive. They could both be true, or one or the other could be true, or neither, but they don't seem to have any obviously very strong evidential relationship to one another. So you could imagine a universe created by God, and then in that universe it turns out to be possible to build really powerful computers, and some of those get used to create these simulations. I'm not sure that I would say it's not parsimonious. It's not really a postulate brought in order to motivate something else. It's in that respect, I think, there are these arguments in the history of philosophy that form the basis of a skeptical challenge. Like, how can we know that the external world exists, that we're not dreaming, or that it's not all just an illusion? So these go back, to Descartes, and you can find earlier ancient examples of this. But there, the structure is that you kind of start from a position of doubt, and then the challenge is prove to me that the external world exists. And then there's philosophy around that. But here, rather, we start by assuming that everything is as it appears to be. There are trees and trains, and there are computers, and there are scientists improving the computers, and we can study the laws of physics. They seem to suggest you could build much more powerful computers with more advanced technology. And you kind of think through the implications of just taking all of this at face value. And one of those implications seems to be that at some point in the future, you could build extremely powerful computers, and you would have the other prerequisites required for creating simulations with gazillions of beings with experiences like ours in them. Many, many more beings than have existed through human history. And then you ask, if that is the case, if the world is such that there were all of these many, many orders of magnitude more beings with our experiences in computers than in original history, then where would we most likely be, given that from the inside you couldn't tell the difference? Then appeal to a kind of piece of probabilistic methodology known as anthropics, where it seems like in that kind of situation you should apply a kind of principle of indifference. And so it would follow then from that with overwhelming probability we would be in the simulation. So there's no kind of extraneous assumption you have to make in order for that reasoning to go through, it seems. There certainly are assumptions, but they are not kind of extraneous. Obviously we're assuming here some form of substrate independence, that in principle you could implement consciousness on other substrates than biological brains, like for example on silicon computers. So that's kind of imported from philosophy of mind.
And is that where you? I mean, again, I'm detecting a kind of a level of that you're more skeptical about all of this, Ros. And is it because of, again, that consciousness issue?
Well, it's speculation. Yeah. Where's the data? Where's the evidence of this? Right. You're a philosopher, I guess, and a white male. You get away with a lot of speculation. I have to have data. I actually have to.
There's plenty of data, like in terms of what kind of computational performance does the physics that we have in our universe permit. And so you could do theoretical models, say, of various nanomechanical systems where you can estimate, not exactly, but you can sort of estimate a lower bound.
I've built those models. I've built statistical physics models. Yeah, no, I know. I've built statistical physics models. I did my doctorate on statistical physics models, simulating, with probability greater than zero, the space of everything that we were trying to create in visual images in the beginning. So, map the whole world visually. So I know the math, and I also know that it's different than feelings, experience, and consciousness. We can represent it. We can symbolically represent it. We can map it, and we can build gorgeous math, which we also don't know where that comes from. Where does all the beauty of the abstract math come from? I'm curious, too, if the mind that you have behind this, if you've thought about how that mind has chosen to create beauty and the aesthetics and the gorgeousness inside, very fabulously abstract math. Because I haven't seen you talk about those things, too. One more thing, too, in this simulated world that I think is really interesting is some people have trouble with the concept of miracles in religion. And yet all of that becomes just a snap to explain when you have the ideas you're putting forth with the simulation. In fact, I remember talking to Will Wright, a creator of the Sims games, and, he controls, right? He can change something in the game. And if we're all just in that game world and the creator reaches in and changes something and it violates all the models we've built within that world of how things work, we might say, that can't happen. That doesn't fit our physics. That doesn't fit our graphical world models. But it is possible in the larger world, right? When the simulator reaches in. So I like the idea of the superintelligence out there able to change things in our world. But I think we should be asking, what is the evidence? And I think there is evidence for the God of the Bible. And I'm not sure there's anywhere near as much evidence for some other something out there that's a superintelligence. I'm not saying it can't exist. I'm just asking about real evidence that you could produce.